They came after midnight from the sky. No one noticed the sky changing at first. That was the strange part. The stars were still there. The moon still rose and fell. The nights looked normal, calm, and quiet. But something had shifted above us, something invisible and patient. It always happened after midnight. In the small town of Grey Hollow, nights were usually peaceful. The streets went silent by 11. Porch lights flicked off one by one. Dogs curled up and slept. Windows closed. Curtains drawn. People believed that night was safe once the doors were locked. They were wrong. On the night it began, the air felt heavier than usual. Not hot. Not cold. Just heavy, like the sky was pressing down on the town. Crickets stopped chirping around 12:07 a.m. That should have been the first warning. But no one was listening. Daniel Harper was still awake, sitting at his desk with a half-empty mug of coffee. He worked the night shift at the power station and had the habit of staying up late even on his days off. His window faced the open fields beyond town, where darkness stretched without streetlights. That night, the darkness seemed deeper. At 12:14 a.m., Daniel noticed something odd. The stars directly above the fields began to fade. Not vanish suddenly, just dim, as if someone was slowly turning down their brightness. He stood and moved closer to the window. Then the sound came. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It was a low vibration, like a distant hum mixed with a slow breathing noise. Daniel felt it more than he heard it. The glass of the window trembled slightly under his fingertips. He checked his phone. No alerts. No messages. No emergency warnings. Outside, the fields were glowing faintly. A pale silver light spilled downward from the sky, forming wide columns that touched the ground silently. There were no beams, no sharp edges, just soft, unnatural illumination. Daniel's heart began to pound. The light moved. It shifted across the field like it was searching. Then the shapes appeared inside it. They were tall. Too tall. Their outlines bent and shimmered, as if they were not fully solid. They did not walk the way humans walk. They drifted forward in slow, deliberate motions, never touching the ground. Daniel stepped back, his breath shallow. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, Mara. "Are you seeing the lights?" Before he could reply, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness, but the silver glow outside grew brighter. The humming deepened, filling the air like pressure in his ears. From across the town, other people were waking up. Windows opened. Curtains twitched. A few brave, or foolish, souls stepped onto their porches. They all saw the same thing. The sky was opening. Not tearing. Not breaking. Opening, like a thin veil being pulled aside. Above the clouds, something massive moved, blotting out the stars completely. And then, things began to fall. Not crashing. Not burning. They descended slowly, controlled, guided. Smooth black shapes with no wings and no visible engines. They hovered just above rooftops, fields, and roads. Every clock in Grey Hollow stopped at exactly 12:18 a.m. Inside one of the hovering shapes, something shifted. The doors did not open outward. The air simply folded, creating openings where figures stepped through. The same tall shapes Daniel had seen in the field now appeared across town. They moved toward houses. Toward people. Toward sleeping families. No alarms sounded. No dogs barked. It was as if fear itself had been muted. In one home, an elderly man woke suddenly and sat up in bed. A shadow stood at the foot of his mattress, stretching unnaturally tall against the wall. Before he could scream, the shadow leaned forward, and the room went silent again. In another house, a child stared wide-eyed as the ceiling rippled like water. A thin, glowing hand reached down, passing through solid matter as if it didn't exist. Across Grey Hollow, people vanished. No screams echoed through the streets. No gunshots. No explosions. Just the soft hum, the silver light, and the slow, careful taking. Daniel watched from his window as one of the figures stopped outside his house. It tilted its head upward. For a moment, Daniel felt like it was looking directly at him, through walls, through flesh, through thought. Then his front door unlocked itself. The handle turned slowly. And the thing from the sky stepped inside. Daniel did not run. He could not move. The thing that entered his house did not open the door fully. It slipped through the gap between the door and the frame, like smoke shaped into a body. The silver light followed it inside, coating the walls in a dull glow. The humming sound grew louder, vibrating inside Daniel's chest. The figure stood in the hallway, tall enough that its head brushed the ceiling. Its surface was not skin. It looked like moving glass, layered and shifting, reflecting memories instead of light. Daniel saw flashes in it: his childhood home, his sister's face, the night sky over Grey Hollow. It was looking through him. Daniel tried to speak, but no sound came out. The figure raised one long arm. Its fingers split into thinner strands, each one pulsing faintly. When it touched Daniel's forehead, the world collapsed inward. He was no longer in his house. He was somewhere vast and dark, floating without a body. Around him, countless other points of light drifted in silence. Each light pulsed with fear, confusion, and fading thought. These were people. Taken. Daniel understood this without being told. A voice entered his mind, not as words but as meaning. Do not resist. Observation requires stillness. Daniel tried to fight back, but there was no strength here. Only awareness. Then, just as suddenly, he was released. He fell backward onto his living room floor, gasping for air. The figure withdrew its hand and stepped away. The humming softened. You're leaving? Daniel whispered, his voice finally returning. The thing paused. For the first time, it communicated again. You are unsuitable. The silver light faded. The figure dissolved into the air, leaving nothing behind. The front door clicked shut on its own. Daniel lay there, shaking. Outside, the lights in the sky began to rise. The black shapes lifted silently, retreating upward as the sky closed itself again. The stars returned, dim and distant. At exactly 12:47 a.m., every clock in Grey Hollow restarted. Power surged back into the town. And the night ended. Morning came with confusion. Phones rang nonstop. Neighbors knocked on doors. Families searched bedrooms, basements, backyards. Some houses were empty. Some beds were still warm, but their occupants were gone. In total, 73 people disappeared that night. No signs of struggle. No broken windows. No blood. Just absence. Daniel went straight to Mara's house. She answered the door with red eyes and trembling hands. They took Evan, she said before he could speak. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Evan was her son. 7 years old. Always awake too late, always asking about the stars. They didn't touch me, Daniel said quietly. They came inside, but they left. Mara stared at him. Why you? She whispered. Why not Evan? Daniel had no answer. By noon, the town was crawling with police. By evening, government vehicles arrived. Men and women in dark uniforms set up barriers around Grey Hollow. Drones filled the sky, scanning, recording, watching. But nothing unusual appeared on their screens. No radiation. No ships. No energy signatures. Officially, the disappearances were labeled a mass psychological event. Unofficially, people knew better. That night, everyone stayed awake. No one slept. After midnight passed without incident, some people cried in relief. Others sat silently, waiting. At 12:03 a.m., the humming returned. This time, it came from directly above the town. People screamed. The sky dimmed again, but not fully. Instead of many lights, there was only one massive column of silver stretching from the clouds to the center of Grey Hollow. The air bent around it. Inside the light, something far larger than the previous figures descended. It was not shaped like a body. It was shaped like a presence. A voice spread through every mind at once. Observation incomplete. Acquisition continues. People ran, but the ground felt thick, like moving through water. Doors locked, windows shattered, walls offered no protection. The figures returned, faster this time. More precise. They ignored some people completely. Others were lifted gently into the air, their bodies dissolving into light as they rose. Daniel felt the presence focus on him. The voice returned, colder now. Anomaly detected. Subject previously rejected. The silver light wrapped around Daniel's body, lifting him off the ground. Pain flashed through his mind, not physical but emotional, memories being pulled apart. Faces. Names. Love. Then it stopped. He was dropped back onto the street. The voice spoke again. You will remain. You will remember. The light vanished. By morning, Grey Hollow had lost 200 more people. And the sky above the town was no longer empty. Something stayed behind. Watching, Grey Hollow was no longer a town. It was a wound. By the third morning, Silence filled the streets. Cars sat abandoned with doors open. Grocery stores were half-stocked, their shelves looted by shaking hands. Schools never opened again. The playground rusted without laughter. Those who remained moved like ghosts. Everyone knew the rule now. After midnight, you did not look at the sky. Daniel gathered with the others at the old community center. About 90 people remained from a town of nearly 1,000. They sat in folding chairs, blankets wrapped tight, eyes hollow and sleepless. Mara sat beside Daniel, holding Evan's jacket in her lap. She refused to let it go. They come every night, someone whispered. And they choose, another replied. No one argued. A man named Thomas spoke up. He had been a science teacher before the world broke. They are studying us, he said. Testing reactions. Patterns. Fear. Then why leave us? Mara asked. Thomas swallowed. Maybe we're mistakes. That word echoed in the room. Mistakes. Daniel felt the truth pressing against his thoughts. The voice from the sky had called him an anomaly. Not taken. Not erased. Kept. For a reason. That night, the town tried something new. Lights on. Fires lit. Noise. Music blasting from speakers. People shouting into the dark like defiance might scare the sky itself. At 12:11 a.m., everything stopped. The fires went out. The speakers died. The air froze. The silver glow returned, but weaker, stretched thin like something conserving energy. The figures descended again, fewer this time. They moved differently now. Slower. Curious. Daniel watched from behind boarded windows as one figure stopped near the community center. Its head tilted, and the surface of its body rippled. Inside it, Daniel saw faces. Human faces. Alive. Screaming silently. Mara saw it too. She collapsed to her knees. They are still in there, she sobbed. The figure raised its arm toward the building. Daniel stepped forward before he could stop himself. No, he said out loud. The figure froze. Its head turned toward him. For the first time, one of them spoke aloud. You are retained, it said in a flat, hollow voice. Daniel's ears rang. Why? He demanded. Why them? Why us? The figure's surface shimmered, displaying images of Earth from space. Cities glowing. Forests burning. Wars. Crowds. Children crying. Graves filling. You are a species in transition, it said. Observation required. Excess removed. Mara screamed. My son is not excess. The figure paused. Its voice softened slightly. Attachment noted. Then the figure stepped back into the light and vanished. No one else was taken that night. That terrified them more than the nights when people disappeared. Days passed. No governments returned. No rescue came. Satellites above Grey Hollow stopped transmitting. Planes avoided the airspace. The town was cut off from the world. Daniel began to change. He heard whispers before the sky lights appeared. He dreamed of places he had never been, vast chambers filled with human memories stored like glowing jars. He could feel when the watchers were near. They are listening through you, Thomas said quietly one morning. Daniel didn't deny it. That night, Daniel climbed to the roof of the old radio tower on the edge of town. The stars above flickered, uncertain. Why me? He whispered to the sky. The answer came immediately. You are capable of remembering pain without breaking. The silver light surrounded him, but did not lift him. You will speak for them. Daniel understood. He was not a survivor. He was a translator. And the sky was preparing for something far worse than observation. Grey Hollow was no longer a town of people. It was a town of witnesses. Every night, those left watched the sky, even when they knew they should not. Every shadow made them shiver. Every breeze whispered that the watchers were near. And Daniel, standing at the edge of the town on the radio tower, felt the weight of knowing too much. The next night, the silver light arrived earlier than before. At 11:59 p.m., the first column descended above the center of town, stretching into the darkness like a pale finger pointing down. The air felt thick, sticky, almost alive. Every living thing trembled. Daniel felt it in his chest before he saw it. Anticipation. The watchers were about to reveal something. This time, they did not move immediately to take anyone. Instead, they hovered silently over the streets, glowing softly, pulsating. The low hum rolled through the town, a sound that vibrated inside bones and thoughts alike. Then Daniel saw it. A projection, A vision in the air above the square. Not light reflected, not shadow, but something that existed between air and memory. It showed images of Earth from above. Cities burned. Forests vanished. Oceans churned with storms. Humanity's wars, greed, and destruction played out like a warning. Mara whispered beside him. They are showing us why. The projection shifted. It focused on Grey Hollow. Houses, streets, schools, then the missing people, shown in silver outlines, glowing faintly inside the air. They were catalogued, studied, starred. Not dead, but not alive in the way the townspeople were. Daniel felt a voice again, deeper than before. It filled his mind without speaking. Observation is incomplete. Testing continues. Removal ensures survival of the system. Daniel shivered. What does that mean? He asked aloud, even though the watchers could hear him. Humanity destabilizes the planet. Excess elements are removed. Survivors will be prepared. Thomas, standing near him, gasped. They are cleaning us up. Daniel understood the phrase without needing explanation. The taken weren't random. They were selected. Humanity was being pruned. And those who remained were being trained, tested, groomed. Mara's hand tightened around his arm. Then why leave us? Why me? Why him? Daniel looked at the sky. The silver light focused on him. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. You are capable of bearing witness. You will remember, record, and endure. Only through awareness can the system maintain balance. Balance. That word settled over Daniel like ice. The watchers were not just taking, they were judging, selecting, preparing. And Grey Hollow had been chosen as a laboratory. Then the figures descended, but not into houses this time. They moved around the edges of the town, scanning, stretching their forms through the streets. They paused in front of people, staring, studying reactions. No one dared breathe. Daniel felt a strange clarity. He could anticipate their movements. He could sense which person would be left alone, which person would be chosen next. And he realized something terrible. Survival was no longer a matter of hiding. It was a matter of control. By 12:33 a.m., the night ended. The silver light lifted and vanished. No one knew was taken. No one slept. But the townspeople were different now. They were changed. They were aware. They were waiting. And Daniel, standing once more at the radio tower, felt the first seeds of understanding take root. The watchers weren't monsters. They were something else entirely. Something beyond human comprehension. And they were patient. The true purpose of midnight was not death. Not destruction. It was preparation. Days blurred together in Grey Hollow. The remaining townspeople moved like shadows through abandoned streets. Food ran low. Water was rationed. Fear hung in the air like thick fog. But something else was growing. Defiance. It started quietly. A whispered plan. A glance at a neighbor. A nod in agreement. People began to realize that while the watchers were patient and powerful, they were not all-knowing. They could observe. They could remove. But they could also be anticipated, sometimes, barely. Daniel became their guide. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. The watchers had chosen him as witness, and with that came knowledge. He could feel the rhythm of the silver light. He could sense when a figure would step through a wall, when a hand would reach into a house. That night, Daniel gathered the survivors in the town hall. About 60 people remained. He drew a crude map of the town, marking where columns of light had appeared and where people had vanished. They are predictable, he said quietly, tracing his finger over the streets. They move like patterns. They can't take everyone at once. And they respond to attention. Fear. Silence. Noise. Observation. Mara, her hands trembling, asked, "So, what do we do?" Daniel looked at her, at the group. "We survive. We resist. But resistance isn't fighting. Not yet. It's being smart. It's knowing what they want and not giving it." The first test came sooner than expected. At 11:57 p.m., the silver glow returned, stretching from clouds to the center of town. The low hum rolled over the rooftops. Figures moved in slowly, scanning houses, streets, and abandoned cars. The townspeople did not scream. They did not peek out windows. They stayed low, breathing shallow, bodies pressed to floors, under beds, in basements. Every movement was calculated, every sound controlled. Daniel stood at the radio tower, hands pressed against the metal railing. He focused. He could feel the presence above, sweeping the town. And then he did something he had never done before. He thought clearly, sharply, commandingly. Not this one, he projected with every ounce of will. A figure paused mid-step above the town square. Its surface shimmered and pulsed. For the first time, it hesitated. Daniel held the thought. And the figure backed away, floating to the edge of the town before vanishing into the night. The survivors did not move until the last echo of the hum faded. When they did, they looked at Daniel with awe, fear, and hope. You can make them pause, Thomas whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. Not forever. But we can influence them, survive them, maybe even fight back without touching them. That realization changed everything. The nights became a game of patterns. Daniel taught people how to read the glow in the sky, how to anticipate the shapes, how to hide without fear and make the watchers hesitate. They learned small tricks, turning lights on in one street while everyone hid elsewhere, making noise in patterns, leaving empty houses that confused the observers. Every night became a rehearsal for survival. But the watchers were not stupid. They adapted. Each night, their movements changed. They became faster, more precise. They began to probe deeper into homes, touching walls with long, pulsing arms that could sense every heartbeat. Daniel realized the truth. The watchers weren't just observing anymore. They were testing. And if the humans failed, the next night would be worse. The survivors had a choice: stay afraid and be taken, or fight with shadows and knowledge, risking everything. By midnight, the town had learned one lesson: resistance wasn't about strength. It was about understanding the rhythm of fear. And for the first time, Grey Hollow felt a spark of hope. But Daniel knew the watchers would not allow hope to grow unchecked. Somewhere above, something waited. Patient, immense, and hungry for the next test. Daniel could feel it coming. Every instinct, every heartbeat, every nerve in his body screamed that tonight would be different. The silver glow in the sky was no longer distant. It was deliberate, focused, heavy with intent. He gathered the remaining survivors in the community center. 4 to 5 people now, their faces pale, eyes wide with exhaustion. We don't just hide anymore, Daniel said. His voice was steady, though his hands shook. Tonight, we learn. We confront. We see what they are capable of, and maybe, just maybe, we can make them leave us alone. Mara held her son's jacket tightly. Are you insane? She asked. If we go outside, they'll take us all. Daniel shook his head. Not if we go carefully. Not if we understand them. We can't run forever. At 11:50 p.m., the air thickened. The low hum began again, rising in pitch until it vibrated inside every bone in Grey Hollow. People pressed themselves against walls, floors, corners. Even breathing felt loud. Then it appeared, a single, massive column of silver light, far brighter than ever before, descending in the center of the town square. Daniel led a small group to its edge, creeping silently through alleys, careful to avoid the main streets where the watchers swept their gaze. As they reached the square, Daniel saw the truth. The column was not empty. Inside floated shapes, human shapes, moving in slow motion. Not alive, not dead. Memories captured in silver, suspended like jars in a vast, invisible library. And at the very center of it, something far larger than the previous figures waited. Something that pulsed like a heartbeat, vast and incomprehensible. Daniel stepped closer, almost against instinct. The air around him thickened. His thoughts felt heavy, as if weighed down by an unseen hand. Then the presence spoke, not as a voice, but as pure thought. Why do you persist, anomaly? Daniel's mind raced. Because we survive. Because we learn. Because we remember. The presence pulsed, and the silver shapes inside the light shifted. Images of people, towns, cities, memories of the world outside Grey Hollow, flashed across Daniel's mind. He saw destruction, fear, love, hate, laughter, tears. Observation is complete. Testing continues. Purpose remains. Daniel clenched his fists. Purpose? You've taken hundreds. You've broken families. What do you want from us? The column pulsed brighter. The larger shape inside stretched, flowing, bending reality around it. The figures surrounding it swirled, moving faster than human eyes could follow. Balance. Stability. Survival of the system. Humans are volatile. They must be pruned. Those who remain are for adaptation. Daniel felt a chill. Adaptation? You mean, you're breeding us for something? The presence shifted, and for the first time, Daniel understood. It was not a monster. It was a machine of observation, of calculation. A force beyond morality, beyond compassion, beyond human understanding. You are capable of endurance. You will record. You will transmit. You will prepare others. You are chosen. Daniel staggered back. The column pulsed again, faster now, almost as if it were breathing. He realized the watchers did not just take people. They tested, selected, and shaped what remained. Mara's voice broke through the hum. Daniel, we can't just stand here. He looked at her. At the group. At the silver light stretching into the sky, swallowing stars. They were small. Fragile. And yet, they had learned something. They could resist. Not with force, not with weapons, but with understanding. They could survive by predicting the watcher's movements, by bending fear into control. Daniel stepped closer to the edge of the light, his heart pounding. The presence pulsed once, twice, as if acknowledging him. And in that moment, he realized, tonight, the watchers were teaching them something far more dangerous than fear. They were teaching them strategy. Grey Hollow had changed. The survivors moved differently now. They spoke in whispers of patterns and rhythms. They watched the sky as if it were a clock, and every flicker of silver light was a message to be decoded. Fear was still there, but it had sharpened into something else. Focus. Purpose. Daniel had spent days studying the light, the hum, the strange pulsing figures. He had realized something crucial. The watchers responded to intent. To thought. To signal. That night, he gathered the remaining 30 survivors in the community center. We've learned to survive, Daniel said, tracing lines on the cracked wooden floor. We've learned their patterns. But survival is not enough. We need answers. We need a signal. Something they can understand. Mara's eyes were wide. You mean, talk to them? Daniel nodded. Not with words. With focus. With thought. They hear our minds. They sense intention. If we can project our thoughts clearly, maybe they'll respond. The town waited. At 11:58 p.m., the first column of silver light descended. The hum rolled over the rooftops, vibrating through walls and floors. The figures moved around the edges of town, scanning as always. Daniel stepped into the square. Others followed cautiously. He raised his arms and focused, sending a single, sharp thought into the light. Why? Why are you taking people? The silver column pulsed violently. The figures inside twisted and shimmered. The larger presence at the center bent downward, like it had noticed him. The air around Daniel thickened, pressing against his chest. Why? He repeated, louder in thought, clearer in intent. And then it happened. The silver light split, forming a shape above him. An outline, geometric, impossible. Images flashed inside it, earth, humans, destruction, memory. And finally, words, not spoken, but felt. Humans are volatile. Observation requires selection. Removal ensures stability. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. Stability? You mean, survival, he projected. Yes. Surviving species must endure system tests. You remain because you are capable. Mara stepped forward, her mind trembling with fear and anger. She sent her thoughts clearly. Our children. Why take them? The silver column pulsed, and images of children, humans, families, and empty spaces swirled inside it. The presence responded. Excess removed. Observation continues. Attachment noted. Resistance acceptable, but irrelevant. Daniel felt a shiver deep in his bones. They were learning. The watchers were not just observing, they were reacting. And this was the first time they had communicated directly with the humans of Grey Hollow. He realized what they had to do next. Survival was no longer enough. They had to teach themselves, prepare their minds, and send the right signals. If they could influence the watchers even slightly, they could protect their town, their people, maybe even stop the nightly abductions. But there was a cost. The survivors had to focus perfectly. One wrong thought, one flicker of fear, one selfish intent, and the watchers would know. They would take more. They would escalate. At midnight, the column lifted slowly, like a tide retreating. The figures faded into the sky. But Daniel knew the signal had worked. The watchers had acknowledged them. They were listening. And that acknowledgement was both hope and terror. Because the watchers were patient, calculating, immense. And Daniel understood this clearly. The next signal had to be precise, or everyone remaining would vanish. Grey Hollow had learned to survive. Now it had to learn to fight with thought. The town of Grey Hollow held its breath. 30 people remained. Every eye was fixed on the sky. Every thought was sharpened, measured, controlled. Daniel stood at the center of the square, Mara beside him, hands gripping his arm tightly. They had trained for this night, the last midnight, knowing it would decide everything. The air was heavy. The hum began faintly at first, barely audible over the beating of hearts. Then it grew, rolling across the rooftops, pressing down on the streets, vibrating in bones and minds alike. The silver light descended, taller, wider, brighter than ever before. Its hum was a storm, a pulse of the entire sky itself. The figures swirled inside it, hundreds now, moving faster than the eye could follow. And at the center, the immense presence loomed. The watchers were here for a final test. Daniel closed his eyes. He projected clearly, with absolute focus. We will survive. We will endure. We will remember and protect each other. The silver light pulsed violently, and the figures froze mid-motion. Then they bent toward the square, centering on Daniel and the remaining survivors. It was as if the watchers were studying not just the town, but the will of these humans. The air shimmered. Images appeared in the light, past Grey Hollow, every family taken, every child vanished. Then, the watchers paused on the present, on those who had remained, who had learned to resist through thought and understanding. Daniel felt a connection. He could feel their minds probing, curious, learning from him as he had learned from them. For the first time, he understood the truth. The watchers did not act out of cruelty. They acted out of logic, cold and precise, measuring the capacity of a species to adapt and endure. Mara projected a thought, trembling but clear. We are not just numbers. We are life. We are memory. We are choice. The silver column pulsed. Shapes within it shimmered and bent. For a moment, the hum faltered, like hesitation. The watchers paused. They had never hesitated before. Daniel realized this was the moment. The test. The balance of survival. He projected one final thought, louder, sharper, unstoppable. If you take more, we will not break. We will resist with everything we are. We will remain. The column vibrated violently, bending reality like water. Then, slowly, the light began to withdraw. The figures dissolved, folding into themselves, retreating upward. The immense presence lingered a moment longer, pulsing in rhythm with the town's collective heartbeat. Then it vanished. Silence returned. No hum. No light. Only the stars, distant but real, twinkling like old friends. The survivors stared at each other in disbelief. They were alive. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to breathe freely. Daniel looked at Mara, and she whispered, "Did we win?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know if it's winning. But we survived. They left us. And they listened. That's all we can ask for." Outside the town, the sky seemed calmer. The watchers were gone, for now. But Grey Hollow would never be the same. Every person who remained carried the knowledge of the midnight tests, the power of thought, and the memory of those who were taken. They were no longer just survivors. They were witnesses, observers, and protectors of a fragile balance between humanity and the intelligence that watched from above. As the first light of dawn broke over the town, Daniel climbed the radio tower once more. He looked at the horizon, at the stars fading in the morning sky, and whispered, "We are ready, and we will not forget." The wind carried the words upward, toward the heavens, silent but certain. Grey Hollow was alive. And for now, the watchers waited.